Hello and welcome back to Escaping Kerbin, where we aim to put a Kerbal on the surface of another planet. So today we're going to change things up. We are going to remove a couple of our mods, particularly Remote Tech and Dang It, which added failure parts to our mod. The reason why we did this is because we have started up RP1, and the idea of realism is the core of that mod. Realistic progression, as it's called. And so, just to give ourselves a little bit of breathing room, on Escaping Kerbin, we decided to get rid of those. And in doing so, we lost our entire satellite network, as you can see there, because we're missing the remote text communication parts that we put on basically every satellite. And so, any satellite that has a part relating to either Dang It or remote tech has been removed from this place file. So that's not great. We essentially have no communications network now. And the other thing is we had vessels out. We had Kerbals out on vessels that may or may not have been deleted. So once we clear through all these vessel loading errors, we're going to go check on that. But not before looking at some science. So I got quite a bit of science to spend, and there might be something useful in here that will help us. But for now, we didn't get anything. We just go back, and we need to check on our science center, our research station on Minmus, and thankfully, it is still there. We didn't have any parts from Dang It on there. We didn't have any repair parts, spare parts as they call them. We also didn't have any remote tech communication dishes on there, so thankfully, these Kerbals are alive and well, doing some science. Actually, have already done some science, and I'm gonna go ahead and transmit that when we can. I did leave TAC life support on because I knew that this craft had TAC life support on it, and even though that is also a realism mod, it's less interfering than remote tech or Dang It is. We're gonna have part failures in remote tech, so in RP1. So let's just leave it for that. So right now, I do actually have connection to the KSC. The communication dishes on here must be powerful enough to reach it, and so I'm gonna go ahead and try to transmit my science. I'm gonna use time warp here to keep our craft charged. Before long, we get the message saying that all of our science has been transmitted, and we will have a huge influx of it. So we'll have a lot of stuff to unlock in the research and development building before starting our next project. Let's go ahead and get them working on the next series of experiments. And anything that they can't research in the lab, we'll transmit back home. Or if we can't transmit it back home, then we'll just delete it. So yeah, transmission seems to work. I was very thankful of this because if this craft couldn't transmit the science that it had learned, we would have had to take the whole craft back down to Kerbin, and that was not very feasible. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we are going to set ourselves an alarm clock for a Duna encounter, the most efficient time to get from Kerbin to Duna. And I am very pleased to say that after this episode that you're watching now, we are going to get started full force into that. We are going to throw ourselves at Duna as much as we can. And we're going to get as many crafts out there in this window of opportunity that we have as possible. So once this episode is done, the next series the next series of episodes for Escaping Kerbin are all going to be Duna focused, and we are finally going to escape. And I'm just coming through here into the science tab to see what I can unlock that will be beneficial in the satellites that I'm going to be sending up today. Because we got rid of remote tech and we lost our entire communications network. Not that it was a very good communications network to begin with, but we got rid of it entirely, and so we need to get a few satellites up in space before we start heading to Duna, because we need a communications network to be able to reach that area. So we're going to go ahead and research the scanning tech. Excuse me, not research, unlock. Because this is an RP1, we don't need to research our tech. Alright, so now let's work on a communication satellite. Decided to opt for these big batteries just to give it as much juice as possible. And we're going to put on 4 of these extendable communication dishes. Since we're not running remote tech, those dishes will just combine their power, and we will have quite an extensive coverage. Of course, I do put in a couple other antennas here just to see if I can maintain control. And we're going to put a decoupler on the bottom because we are going to make this into a subassembly, and we're going to stack them on top, get a couple different satellites going at the same time. But then I realized I'm going to need to have some kind of propulsion here, so let's remove these top 2 batteries and put in some tanks, and we're going to throw in some spider engines there. But the delta V that I get with these 2 tanks is kind of ridiculously small, so I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of those entirely in favor of a larger tank with more fuel. Because what is going to happen is that this craft is going to be doing the circularization. We're going to get ourselves into an elliptical orbit and then release each craft at the apoapsis, and the craft itself will finish the orbit around Kerbin. But because we don't have any satellites up in space now, we're going to have some sort of control of this, so we're going to put a Kerbal inside a command pod to pilot this. And then I try to put it into a fairing, but I don't like how small the fairing is underneath the crew capsule, so I decided to put it on top and make it as aerodynamic as possible by keeping the diameter very low. I'm telling you, playing RP1 has got me designing ships a little bit differently. And it's a little bit strange to come back into regular Kerbal this way. So I take an engine plate and I throw a couple Terriers on there, a little 3-stack. But I don't like the thrust to weight ratio on this. I don't like how hard it was to push forward, so I'm going to just switch that out for a singular engine that's built with 4 engines itself. The Poodle, it was better than the test that I just ran. So now we're going to check our staging and run another simulation. And that simulation went fairly well. So we're going to just change the one thing that I had a problem with, and that is rotating our craft. So we're going to put in a reaction wheel in it, and that will help us because the spider engines don't have very much gimbaling. So it was a real pain to get our satellite to spin around to point to the maneuver node. So having a reaction wheel is going to make a huge difference in that. And then we just need to extend out the fairing a little bit. And there we go. Check the staging one more time. And then simulate. And each one of these simulations is costing us money. If you pay attention to the number in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see how much money we started with and what we end up at the end of the episode with. And it's considerable because we've been doing quite a few tests. We've been carrying over some of the lessons we've learned from RP1, and one of those lessons is to simulate frequently. The problem is in RP1 the simulations are free, and with the crash program we can make them free, but I feel like I kind of like the cost to the simulations. I feel it's a nice balance to being able to run entire missions and fix your problems before you even get them. So it makes sense. So here we are with our very standard lift vehicle, and that will get us to Kerbin orbit, and then we'll rely on the Poodle for the rest of the journey. So here we are on the launch pad in the early morning, and we are ready to ignite. So it takes off pretty normally. The thrust to weight is fairly good. The Pila engine has a lot of control, so we don't have to worry about it flipping around too much. But still, we slowly adjust our angle. And then we're going to skip ahead a little bit until the point where our side boosters flame out. And now. And easy solid decouple. The separation motors, the Separatrons, do a great job, especially when tweak scaled up one size. And I feel that tweak scaling those are okay because they are just solid rocket booster, so all it is just increasing the size. So here we are, skipping ahead to the circularization, and then that engine runs out of fuel, and then we go back and we finish the rest of the circularization with the Poodle. However, skipping ahead a little bit, during our circularization we ended up passing our apoapsis before even bringing our periapsis out from the ground, so I'm going to have to do some fancy maneuvering here and point myself a little bit more orbital out, as well as towards the direction towards our prograde, and in doing so hopefully I can force my periapsis out of the surface of the planet. And it works. Once we get ourselves pointed up enough, we give ourselves the room to then point prograde and get our periapsis out, and now we are circularized. Well, now we are circularized. And there we go. So now we're going to set our maneuver to bring us out to the edge of Kerbin's sphere of influence to about 80,000 kilometers. 800,000 kilometers, excuse me. I should have, in looking at this mission after the fact, I should have adjusted my inclination to be fairly equatorial, excuse me. Have a very low inclination on this, would have been more preferable. But as it is, we are going to be at an incline. But that's okay, because all three satellites will be on the same incline. So we went ahead and extended all the solar panels because why not get all of the energy that we can for the entirety of the journey, so we don't have to worry about loss of control. go. We went a little bit past our burn time, but that's okay. Since it's such a long burn, it didn't affect our trajectory all that much. And this isn't the most efficient burn. More efficiently would have been to burn at our periapsis, but I did want to do my maneuvering in the sunlight, and so I chose to opt for that as opposed to more efficiency. But if we were to want to do this as efficient as possible, we would have burned at our periapsis, because that is when you're going the fastest, and increasing your speed is a lot easier when you're going faster to begin with than at the apoapsis where we burned, where we were going the slowest. Here I am just trying to click off the information because it was taking up the screen and I didn't like that. But our apoapsis is pushing out faster and faster now. Once it passes the Mun's sphere of influence, it's going to really take off. We have to be careful not to send ourselves on an escape trajectory. You can see the incline that we're on right now is pretty steep. So there we go. Hit basically our ideal height. It is, however, coming down, that's just a thing that happens sometimes. So the altitude, changed slightly from the time that we first stopped our engine. So I'm going to time warp out here, close enough to the apoapsis that it's a short journey to it, but not close enough that we have to really rush ourselves to place our maneuver. And it's about this time that I realized that our solar panels somehow broke off at some point on our main craft, on the crewed capsule, which is not ideal. It's not great, but it's not the end of the mission, that's for sure. Especially since we have all these big solar panels attached to ourselves already. Okay, so we separated the top satellite, and we are now plotting a maneuver point for it. We're going to go ahead and point ourselves very easily, because we have the reaction wheel. We're going to point ourselves very easily towards our target node. Watch the planets go by. And time warping to the time to fire. And there we go. 4 tiny little engines, but they should get the job done. I ran this in simulation and have proven that they will be able to handle the burn, the circularization burn, that we do have enough fuel. So I'm fairly confident in their performance, and especially now that we don't have part failures, that's going to make things a lot easier. And I really wrestled with the idea of making this easier because, I've played with remote tech for as long as I've been modding KSP. That was one of the first mods that I really got into, and has been in every single playthrough this entire time because I just really enjoyed it. But lately I've been having a lot of problems keeping my networks communicating with each other and losing signal to our probes. And I was trying to build out a Duna mission using remote tech and how we were going to go ahead and get probes out there and stuff. And it just was not working out in all the ways that I tried to design the mission. It just wasn't working out. So I decided, you know what, let's leave the realism for the realistic series, and we'll just go with stock KSP. And with stock KSP, I can easily create the networks that I need to create because it's just not as complex as remote tech. So here I just named our satellite, and it finished its orbit. So we're going to go ahead and switch back to the other craft. So now the other craft is going to go ahead and head back down to its periapsis, and then by the time it reaches the apoapsis again, the first satellite should be in position to line up the next. We get a little bit of science, well actually we get quite a bit of science from our mid-miss ground stations that just decided to transmit through at that point. And I look and we have plenty of food and life support supplies, so I'm very happy with that. This Kerbal is just going along for the ride. He's going to be out here for quite some time, but he will definitely earn his stripes on the way back. Our Kerbal for today is Maxdos. How do you pronounce it? Maxdos Kerbin. He's a 1-star pilot. He's been to Minmus before. And then I didn't have my staging right, so I ended up staging both satellites off the top of our crewed capsule. So it's not great, but again, not the end of the mission, because we can just separate these two, and we'll just have 3 floating. But I will decide to leave Maxdos out in orbit for the time being, because he was going to be the last thing to come home, and he still will be the last thing to come home once we get all of our satellites into position. So I'm naming this one as well. And the reason why it keeps coming into the flight control room is because we use the letter C on it, and the game just decides to still utilize the shortcut commands. So once again, time warping out to the apoapsis. And once again, time for the circularization burn. I'm telling you, that simulator program crash was critical in this. As you saw my mouse bouncing back and forth between the 2 satellites, I like the angle that we have. It seems like this is going to work out to make a nice triangulation of our satellites. And try to match the orbit as close as possible. So now we switch into the 3rd craft. We're just going to follow it as it rushes past Kerbin. It does, of course, take several days. I see the moon coming through. Thankfully, it doesn't get close enough to adjust our orbit, and then just like that, we're on our way back out. And just like that, we head for the circularization. And just like that, we've got it. So there we go. We now have 3 satellites in orbit in a mostly triangular state. It's not the best. It's not a perfect 30-degree triangle, but it'll work for now, for probably a while before they start slipping out of sync. But, oh well. So now it's time to switch back to our craft, back to Maxdos, but we can't control it for some reason. Our engines are on, we have battery, we have all that charge, but we get no response. And when we look down in the right-hand corner, we have no profile picture. So as I look at the mission log, I see that our life support was damaged somehow. I'm not sure how, but all of our life support leaked out, and Maxdos has died. So a fellow pilot goes to the island runway in the middle of the night. As soon as he gets the news, goes and pays respect to his fallen friend. But there's still much science to be done, and he did not die in vain, because that satellite network is going to propel us forward to the surface of Duna. But that is for the next episode. Anyways, this is where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more Escaping Kerbin. If you did, please consider giving me a like, drop me a comment, and let me know your thoughts. And I will see y'all in the next one. Take care.